So, housekeeping, so I need to tell you that, so you're taking on a fictional business identity, assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. So bottom line is, make sure we know who you are, make sure you remind us who we are. You have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, ethical dimensions of the problem, and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. So you won't be interrupted. After you're completed, we'll go through a 20-minute Q&A phase. And then after that, we'll break character, and then we'll give you feedback on your role. Keep in mind, ethical aspect of the analysis is the most important part. Do not go into philosophical terminology or base your argument on religious or theological grounds. Make sure everybody presents, so try not to read the screen, and everybody needs to have a speaking role, like I said. That's all I have.
Great, thank you so much. So we are a consulting group, and we have been retained by Tyson Foods, and we are today speaking to the board of directors at Tyson Foods. So, hi, thank you so much for retaining the Robert Day Consulting Group. We are so excited to again work with Tyson Foods on increasing sustainability initiatives. Our solution will not only reduce operating costs, but it will reduce carbon emissions, water pollution, and keep competitive market landscape for Tyson Foods. So our presentation outline, our synopsis, firstly we'll go into the background, we'll identify a little bit of the problems and the operations for Tyson Foods. Second, we'll move into the solution and understand the competitive market. And then thirdly, we'll move into the ethical, legal, and financial considerations of our proposed solution. So a little bit of background. We really wanted to congratulate Tyson Foods on their strengths, particularly their market share, that you have been able to retain a 44% market share in the chicken industry with your 860 million chickens raised within 2018, awarded most admired in food production, with $38.3 billion in revenue for 2018, and 80th of Fortune 500. And that 1 in 5 pounds of beef, chicken, and pork produced in the United States are all attributed to Tyson Foods production. So again, we wanted to reiterate that there is an increasing demand for chicken worldwide. We know that there is an increasing demand or a shift away from meat consumption in the new millennial generation, but actually what we found in our research is that since 1996, the demand for chicken has increased 25% in the US, 40% in Europe, 89% in China, and 183% in India. So with that, our trajectory for global demand for chicken, especially in the poultry market, as you can see, increases from 82 million tons to 181 million tons produced in 2050 within the next 30 years. So how many chickens are eaten per year? 60 billion chickens per year. That means 2,000 chickens per second are actually eaten at any time, any place in the world. And with that trajectory from 2005 to 2050, this number is going to double within the next 30 years. So identifying this general trend, the trajectory, we wanted to identify a little bit of the operating or problems that we've noticed within Tyson's operations. So some threats and weaknesses, we've noticed that actually Tyson Foods has been known for several billion tons of waste produced each year. That in 2017, Tyson Foods wastewater had led to the largest toxic dead zone in US history. Tyson Foods is a bigger polluter than any other American company, Exxon, Dow, and Coke. And that Tyson has, in fact, used fines or actually paid millions of dollars in fines to the EPA to mitigate these risks. So with the waste that is produced, 10 billion gallons of wet animal waste are produced per year. To put this in perspective, that's 15,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools that are produced with the 860 million chickens that are produced per year. We have to understand the consumer basis of demand. So understanding that currently that the demand is actually changing, we actually found in our research that 75% of US consumers are willing to change their consumption habits to reduce the impact on the environment. that 80% would pay more for products associated with social responsibility, and that 90% of millennials ages 21 to 34 said that they would pay more for sustainable brands altogether. So with that, we have to understand the capitalizing trends. We need to understand our distributors especially, as well as the sustainable supply chain shift currently undertaking since 2017. So especially with Apple. Apple has actually persuaded Foxconn and TSMC, who are the biggest suppliers for iPhone production, to only use renewable energy when they are producing iPhones. This is a huge shift. This was announced actually a couple months ago in February 2019, and in fact 74% of their entire carbon footprint comes from their suppliers directly. Secondly, Hershey Company as well is emphasizing their sustainable supply chain by emphasizing cocoa for good strategy, ensuring that their farming techniques as well as their supply chain is overall sustainable. And thirdly, Walmart, Tyson's biggest buyer of chicken, is actually producing this new initiative called Project Gigaton. And with this initiative, they're ensuring that their suppliers all combined together will reduce GHG emissions by 1 billion metric tons by the year 2030. In fact, Walmart has even awarded Kernel Foods as well as Smithfield Foods in their efforts for sustainable initiatives. Tyson Foods cannot lose their competitive strategy just based on this new sustainable initiative in their supply chain management. That's why my colleague Sabrina will move into the proposition proposed today.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. So Tyson Foods, currently the leader of the meat industry, how do they take advantage of these trends and stay on top of their game? So our proposition is to utilize a very innovative and advanced technology called biogas. And we propose that Tyson update all 123 of its meat processing plants by 2030. So what is biogas? Biogas is a gaseous fuel that's produced by organic waste matter, aka the fecal matter of your pigs, beef, and chickens. And what happens is we take that fecal matter, put it in an anaerobic digester, which creates 100% organic fertilizers, both liquid and solid. From this machine, we also can create a biogas, which will subvert our current carbon emissions to perhaps power our meat processing facilities as well. So we believe that this biogas solution is an innovative approach to Tyson's current carbon problem, waste problem, and pollution. So this is just an outline of where your current meat processing plants are. There's 123, as you can see, concentrated in the lower Midwest. And the reason that Tyson Foods is linked to the current water waste in the United States is because there was the United States Geological Survey that showed that Tyson was the only meat company with major meat processing facilities in each of the listed states that contributed to the high pollution levels in the United States Gulf. So we propose that we focus on these areas primarily at our headquarters here in Arkansas and actually capitalize on the chicken trend and our chicken waste. So currently, Tyson Foods actually has 6 biogas facilities, whereas before our waste from our animals would just sit out in large treatment lagoons. Now we can actually use the biogas from this waste and take advantage of this renewable fuel source. So we believe, again, that there's power in our poultry poop, and that by using our the new biogas technology, we can generate renewable energy, mitigate environmental hazards by subverting our wastewater, and generate liquid fertilizers, which would also help internalize our supply chain. So just an implementation plan, which is in purple. First, we're going to assess the farm capacity and see how our farms can perhaps implement this. This will happen from today until next year with a little bit of leeway depending on if this is something that our farmers could adapt to. Next is the installation for our first 55 digesters from 2020 to about 2024. Yeah, just some check-in points right there in the middle. Third, we think that it's really important what our consulting group found is that internally and externally we're really engaged. So we're showing transparency about our biogas plants and how they're being implemented and really getting our consumers excited that Tyson Foods is taking an environmental initiative. And finally, we're going to install our last 55 anaerobic digesters hopefully ending a bit before 2030, which was our goal.
Great. So I'll be moving more into the competitive landscape. So taking into consideration how our competitors have actually succeeded in implementing biogas digestive systems, we should look at Smithfield Foods, the leader in the pork producing industry. So Smithfield Foods, how have they done it? They first increased their sustainable initiative investment, $250 million invested with Dominion Energy and in a manure to energy initiative that will take place over 90% of their facilities, at least projected for North Carolina and Utah. Added with their turning their biogas into energy, it is actually noted that within South Dakota and their North Carolina operations currently, that combined they have been able to produce over 500,000 decatherms of energy. And finally, with these two areas combined, they've been able to reduce their operating costs and reduce carbon footprint overall. In fact, Duke Energy is an electric holding company, has even bought 11,000 megawatts of energy, which is enough to power 900 homes in the area. And the energy requirement for overall operations for Smithfield Foods has actually been completely mitigated because they've been able to become more self-sufficient with their energy-related operating costs. So what is it about poultry that we can really leverage? How can we take this threat in the market and understand Tyson's strengths and combine them to create this happy marriage of an opportunity? Well, poultry poop actually has an excellent yield. In fact, understanding the substrate, we see that pig manure, their gas yield is about 240 liters per kilogram, cow manure 310 liters per kilogram, and poultry droppings is actually 2 to 3 times more than that of pig manure at 620 liters per kilogram. This is the golden egg solution. Next, we'll move into our ethics.
Yeah, so it's really important that Tyson Foods considers a really important ethical framework, of course, corporate responsibility. So our group looked at both the environmental side and people side of this ethical dilemma, again, emphasizing moral corporate responsibility in this. So first, focusing on the environment, the principle is to do the least amount of harm to the environment and respect the earth. So currently, Tyson Foods is the leading contributor to the toxic dead zone, and the top 5 meat plants, including Tyson Foods, actually emits more carbon greenhouse gases than ExxonMobil, Shell, and BP. So we think that Tyson Foods, as a leader in the meat industry, can actually be a leader in ethical, environmental meat industry as well. The next principle is caring about the people and our fellow Americans and consumers that we're providing meat to across the country. Of course, the principle is the well-being of people is the ultimate good, while the suffering is the ultimate harm. The reality is that over 200 million Americans, or over half of Americans, are affected by contaminated water, and that carbon emissions have been posed to cause serious threat to human lives as well.
Great, so I'm now going to walk you through the financial analysis. To do so, I'm going to first discuss a quote from your 10K. I'm then going to walk you through a timeline of fines against Tyson Food and your subsidiaries. And then I'm going to look at a case study with Brinson Farms and how that can be scaled to Tyson Foods. So to begin, failure to continually innovate and maintain our brand image could adversely impact our operating results. With the widespread use of technology and social media, every post and comment has the potential to damage your reputation and thus financial position. So I'd like to keep those two things in mind as we move forward. First, there was a $14.1 million fine for violation of environmental laws. Then, there was an $18.3 million fine for violating the Clean Water Act. Then $11.4 million for polluting discharge. Then $4.25 million for chemical release. And finally, $2.5 million again for violating the Clean Water Act. Now, between 2000 and 2018, there was a total of $53 million in fines just for environmental violations. So this is not only expensive for Tyson Foods, but it damages your reputation. So what can we do about this? We looked at Eagle Grain Energy. They partnered with Brinson Farms for peer-reviewed research on poultry manure. Their patented technology utilized the 2 to 3 times greater biogas potential that of dairy. They also have partnerships with the USDA, Department of Energy, and several universities. Not only that, they have already received awards from Tyson Foods. So when they implemented their anaerobic digestion into their poultry farms, they have a large digester, approximately $1.2 million. Now, to put that in perspective, a single processing plant costs $320 million. And if we are going to look at this as our brand image, Tyson Foods spent $243 million on advertising. Next, depending on the farm size, there's an approximate cost of $480,000 to $850,000. Then something you might not consider, water use. Biogas production used approximately 6.9 million gallons annually. Now, again, that isn't a significant amount. This is equal to the average annual use of 130 Americans. Next, there are many benefits. So first, if we look at biogas production, there's a profit of $40 per ton. If this can be scaled to Tyson Foods, a conservative estimate is that it's $60 million. Next, there are significant energy savings. 82% reduction in the electricity bill, 81% reduction in the propane bill, and the 6 wastewater biogas test sites avoided $9 million in natural gas costs. Additionally, there's a profit of $10 per ton of fertilizer sold, a revenue of $20 per ton of vegetable waste accepted, and $900 per ton of liquid waste accepted. The last two are from nearby facilities or farms that we can take in with the biogas production. Now, these can all be scaled and used to address Tyson's decreasing operating margins. In 2016, they were 12%. In 2017, they fell to 9%. And in 2018, they were only 7%. Now, these are significant. It's a problem that we should address. But as we started off, I want to remind you of innovation and brand image. That leads me to discussing Walmart. Walmart is 17.3% of sales for Tyson Foods, representing over $7 billion. Now, Walmart has a 2030 goal to create zero waste. They also want to operate with 100% renewable energy. Now, Walmart does not have a contract with Tyson Foods. There's no obligation to keep them as a customer. And Tyson has not updated those 6 original biogas production sites since 2008, yet they bragged about them in the 2013 sustainability report and again in the 2017 sustainability report. And as we addressed earlier in our presentation, large corporations like Apple and Hershey have the power to ask more of their supply chain. They want transparency, clean energy use. And if Tyson isn't going to step forward in that production, then they're going to be left behind. Next, Adam is going to look at the legal analysis.
Great. Thank you, Cole. So in the legal analysis, what we'll touch on are the regulations that involve biogas, the permits that Tyson will need to receive in order to open biogas facilities, and lastly, I'm going to expand a little bit on what Cole talked about with the different fines and lawsuits that Tyson has faced. So first of all, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act of 1976 is something that's important for this topic. There were 5 different points that the RCRA covers. There's dispose, there's generate, there's transport, and then there's store as well as treat. But these 3 main points right here are what Tyson really needs to key in on in the legality issues of biogas distilleries. So in dispose, that means that it governs the disposal of solid and non-hazardous waste. With generate, this act, it covers and promotes the generation of safe energy through the use of solid and non-hazardous energy. And lastly, transport requires the safe and thorough transportation of this biogas energy throughout the whole entire supply chain. The permits, as you see under the federal government tends to delegate these permits to the state governments on an individual basis. And for the state governments under solid waste, the majority of states have more of a manure exempt, so they exempt permits for manure facilities. Also with the permits that require, or there are required permits for anaerobic digesters, which the biogas facilities would have. Under water waste, the different states require the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, and those are the most important permits under the NRCA. Sorry, but so the water waste permits that are required are a state-by-state basis, but the federal government tends to delegate whether it's a small farm, a medium farm, or a large farm. And so with the water waste, under large farms, the EPA considers large farms as point sources of water pollution. Therefore, the NPDES permits are required. Also, the states require that each facility maintains a nutrient management plan. For medium farms, they tend to have very similar regulations for the large farms, so I won't go too far into that. And the small farms, which is very important for Tyson, they must comply with the NPDES if the farm discharges the waters of US through man-made devices, or if the farm discharges through direct contact of animals with waters of the US. So I mentioned that the small farms are a very important part because Tyson has over 6,000 contract farmers, and the majority of these farmers tend to be under the category of small farmers. So again, like I said, they must follow the NPDES requirements in relation to their processes. An important note is that select states will require extra permits if digestion systems accept off-site waste, or depending on the amounts of waste that they use. And this is important as well because if Tyson wants to benefit the entire community, they can take in waste from outside farms in the surrounding area. And building off of Cole's point earlier, these are just some specific quotes for different events that have happened over the past 19 years. So in 2003, Tyson pleaded guilty to pay over $7.5 million to the United States in the state of Missouri, and they continued to discharge untreated wastewater through its storm drains after saying that they would not do that anymore. In 2009, the Tyson Fresh Meats plant in Nebraska was found to have violated a 2001 consent decree by allowing numerous discharges of fecal coliform and nitrates to enter into the Missouri River. And lastly, the environmental advocacy group Environment America released an analysis that concluded that Tyson Foods is a bigger polluter of American waterways than any other company in the USA. Now, I bring those to your attention just to show that there really is an issue. And we've thrown a lot of information out there today, and I want to just recap over what we've talked about. We've talked about the different competitive analyses, the problem that is before us, and the financial, legal, and ethical analysis. To reiterate our proposition, we propose that Tyson seriously looks into creating these biogas facilities and implementing them into their supply chain. Tyson has been successful over 100 years because of the amazing products that they have produced. But in a society that is continuously growing towards the eco and environmentally friendly nature, it is important that Tyson adjusts and that they implement these biogas facilities so that they can continue to grow and be profitable. And lastly, it's important that Tyson not only acknowledges the problem but acts. And we promise you that if you do this, that there will be no foul play and that you can sift through the manure so that there can be a solution found. Thank you very much. We open the time to any questions.
Barney, you want to?
Go ahead. Well, I'm a little bit concerned about our competitiveness if we start spending all this money, devoting all these resources to biological waste. Aren't we going to lose out to our competitors and lay off a lot of people, lose contracts?
No, there won't be any layoffs necessarily. In fact, creating the biogas facilities, actually in Smithfield Foods as well as Cornfell, they actually found that implementing the biogas facilities actually created more employment. In fact, because they were able to contract with external third-party vendors, particularly like Duke Energy or Dominion Energy, they actually found some way to attract more talent into implementing the biogas facilities. I understand that there is concern about investing more money and capital into the biogas facilities. But if you actually look at our appendix about renewable energy from biomass section 45, we see that Tyson Foods can actually benefit from tax incentives. In fact, you can gain 2.3 cents per kilowatt of hour, as well as biomass energy under this federal energy regulation says that you can take a 30% investment tax credit for installation costs. So I think this is really the way that can not only allow for more employment, but also you can have this production tax credit overall.
I got a couple questions. I took notes, and you guys did a fabulous job. But we're running the business here. And in the agriculture bill that's on the Hill presently, it deals with clean water. Why haven't you discussed some of the other options for clean water as opposed to just building these factories? And why couldn't there be a combination of water treatment systems like placing grass in the runoff area and solar energy?
So one of the main reasons that we really address biogas is because not only is water an issue, but also the fecal matter that comes from the animals that you raise. And so it's important that not only do we cover the water waste, but also the fecal waste. And the water waste is being affected by the fecal waste and that it's becoming contaminated.
But that's what the whole notion of grass in the runoff areas does. It stops that. And it cleans the water as it goes into the streams and rivers and stuff. Well, it would just, personally, I'd like to have heard some other options as opposed to just biogas. I mean, we want to figure out how we do this the most cost-effective way. And there's never just one way of doing it, right?
Right.
Okay.
We just found that biogas particularly can address both the water contamination issue while also reducing operating costs in the long run. And of course, Tyson, in fact, over the last 10 years has contributed a bit of their efforts, a bit of your efforts into the runoff water waste, especially since the 2017 toxic water waste. But this is just a way for us to have a preventive measure before that water can get contaminated. Biogas actually insulates all of that toxins in a secure volume.
You know, it's great to hear you guys talk about long-term solutions, but fortunately or unfortunately, we live in a short-term world. Every quarter, we have to report to the investors how we're doing. So, is there a way that you could work on a greener environment in stages?
And reverting back to the slide where we showed the 30-year plan, the expenses really wouldn't be that high in the annual report or in the quarterly report. Rather, it would be a long-term plan. I mean, Tyson's been around for over 100 years, and they've been able to do that because of sustainable practice.
But what happens in the annual report we have to produce this year?
Yeah.
I mean, how is this going to affect our bottom line?
Yeah, we think that adopting biogas technology and emphasizing sustainability in general for Tyson Foods is really going to be exciting for our consumers. That's also why we decided to take a corporation route for sustainability rather than relying on the government, because it can be so monotonous and take such a long time. So when we can brag about as a business that we are taking these efforts and utilizing these measures towards United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, I think it's something that our consumers can be really proud in, and also our partners, including Walmart, which have been emphasizing and really working on.
Last question.
Yeah.
What do we brag to our stockholders about? Because those are the people that we report to.
I think it's the next generation of meat consumption.
They're looking at return on their investment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Robert,
Yeah, thank you. If I did my math, my addition right, your chart showed roughly 55 processing facilities started early and then another 55 later.
Yes, that's 110.
110
Yes.
total, but when I looked at the map, it looked like we had some pretty good density of providers in certain areas. What about the economy of scale of building some more centralized locations and transporting the waste to a larger and potentially more efficient centralized factory than building one at each spot?
Right, I think our map is a bit overgeneralized, but in terms of the centralization approach, we definitely want to take that into consideration. We actually have a bit of flexibility in our timeline. So in terms of the triangles that we've placed in the timeline, those are actually checkpoints. We want to make sure that in the iterative process of installing these biogas facilities, that we can actually then understand how that facility is actually being able to produce energy in that short period of time. And once we're able to gain that data, we want to make sure that the data is reflective of our general trajectory, and from the data that we are able to actually extrapolate, then we want to then have a better iterative map of centralizing all of the operations, as Sabrina mentioned earlier, especially with the map of our concentration, especially in the South, Midwest, especially in Arkansas. We want to first strategize based on location, as well as the current capacity that each of those facilities have. So by focusing on Arkansas, moving into Carolinas, and then hopefully Tennessee, Alabama, we can then have a more centralized manner, hopefully with information sharing of what the other facilities were able to learn over that process.
To build on that,
one thing, if I may. Yeah. So being in overregulated California, my other concern was, so we go with some of these plants and we start putting in these digesters that create energy and also keep creating fertilizer, but is that going to, in your research, will that expose us to any grandfathered regulatory conditions that we're living under right now that are going to cause secondary expenses on our part to address other parts of the facility?
with the different permits that we addressed, the permits, the initial cost ranges from about $500 to about $5,000. And those permits, they are very general because the EPA pushes under the act that we talked about, this 1976 Act. And it's been implemented for over 40 years now, and it's something that the U.S. is really sticking to. And each state is different, case by case, but especially California, overregulated, they would tend to promote this.
Well, so I'm sorry, so let me restate, because I realized there was nothing in California. No, my question was, you take this one part of the business, you say, okay, fine, we're going to start using digesters, which means we're going to restructure the machinery and some other things on the plant site under the assumption that we have certain operations we're doing now that you couldn't do if you put a brand new plant in because regulations change. Then by making the shift to the infrastructure for a digester, will we now be exposed to other things? Say, well, since you went and did this, this other part of your plant is not up to current code. You changed that, so now you got to go spend money. It's just like if I add a room to my house, the inspector says, okay, well, you've done this, but now you got to go change out all the old wiring throughout the rest of the house. You see what I'm saying?
I understand your question.
So did any of that come up as you researched the cost of implementation?
So Tyson has had the 6 facilities already implemented for over 10 years.
Great example.
And there's been no problems that have been reported, and there's nothing that we can foresee. And obviously times can change, but there's nothing that we can foresee that would happen.
Okay.
Going through your presentation, did I see correctly that we already have 6 of these already?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So why haven't we implemented more of these if it's such a good idea? I'm assuming we've had these for a while.
Yeah.
And why haven't we implemented it in other places?
Well, to be completely frank, Tyson Foods has decided to pay the fines each time something comes up and just move on.
So my point is it cheaper to pay the fines than implement so back to my colleague's question with regard to return on investment. And the implementation costs to make this happen, how soon do we get our money back? I understand it's a good thing to do, but at the end of the day, how long is it taking us? I'm assuming we haven't made these changes wholesale throughout because we don't see the return.
Yes, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. So what Tyson is doing is paying, in the last 18 years, $53 million in fines. So yes, it is cheap to just keep covering up the problem and moving on. But what we have found is that the next generation of consumers care about socially responsible business. They want the future of businesses. They vote with their dollar for companies they believe in. If we are not going to make that transition, there is going to be no future for Tyson Foods. Going off of that idea, if Walmart is to demand more of their consumers, right, because Apple did this. Apple asked more of their supply chain. They told their companies that they need to run on 100% renewable energy. You can't say no to that opportunity. So if Walmart does the same with us, we are in a situation where we will lose over $7 billion.
Hang on one second. I don't know how many people there are in your consulting firm, but it looks to me like the whole firm is here. And we're paying for all that. Why do we care at Tyson? People are eating more chicken. We're eating more of our products all the time, all over the world. What if we do nothing?
So if we want to go to one of our appendix addressing, again, to bring up Apple because they are very forward-thinking with their consumers. So one Apple shareholder raised concerns.
Yeah, but even though they're called Apple, nobody eats them.
Yes, but they do buy.
They eat our products.
Yes, and they buy their products in excess. So one shareholder addressed a similar problem. They had concerns that they were objecting to affiliations that may primarily advance social or environmentally friendly causes rather than promoting strictly shareholder value. And Tim Cook's response was, you should get out of the stock if they expect him to be motivated solely by money. So looking just at shareholder value and not social environmental causes is short-sighted because those things do pay off in the long run and they will be the future of the company.
Frankly, one shareholder is not going to make a difference.
Well, he was actually outvoted by the majority of the shareholders. So the majority of shareholders felt strongly and passionately about moving with the social and environmental causes.
And that's the wave of the future, to be quite honest. That's the wave of the future, to be much more socially and environmentally aware. And so, at the end of the day, we propose that it would hurt Tyson if they didn't make a move.
Here's the thing. We can always say we got 6 plans to handle waste, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And with the new tariffs, we're exporting a lot more chicken, particularly in places like Russia and China. So why can't we find why can't we go back to some options to figure out ways that we can generate green energy? We'll continue to use the gas plants, and we can show a progression of how, with what we're doing already, and the fact that we're using other methods to treat water as a part of our advertising, as opposed to a capital expenditure that could be prohibitive to our bottom line.
So something that I like to imagine is on the front of the Wall Street Journal, Tyson to implement over 110 biogas facilities over the next 15 years. I think that's something that would spark your advertising quite a bit, and it'd be a great initiative for the company for the next 15 years to really grow and to excite consumers,
How
not
about
only
if
in the
we
U.S.
say-
but in the world.
How about if we say we're producing more chickens at a lower cost to our consumers? How does that sell to the
Well-
people who are buying chicken?
Yeah, so to address that concern, the operating margins are decreasing because feed costs are increasing, trade costs are increasing, all the inputs are increasing. So yes, Tyson Foods can grow by $2 billion in revenue each year. Fantastic, but those operating margins are decreasing. So if you aren't going to do something like implement biogas, which has an 82% reduction in electricity costs, that does help with that problem.
Again, what does solar energy do to reducing our costs? And that doesn't, the costs that you referenced that are increasing, that are reducing our margins, we haven't heard anything about how we improve on those costs or reduce those costs.
Yeah, I think what our consulting group found is that a major environmental hazard that's linked to Tyson is this water waste. So if you could flip back to Appendix C. Yeah, one back. Yeah, water pollution. So Tyson Foods in 2016 was responsible for 5% of the water pollution in America, and solar energy has nothing to do to address that, where biogas does. And we think that an article or like more as the reason that this is not really on 2019's radar is not because it hasn't gone away. So we think that this is something that will continue to resurface unless Tyson takes action really soon to address the water waste
But
problem as
can
well.
we do other things to address the water thing?
Last question, go ahead.
To take action for water waste in other ways.
The water pollution.
Yeah. That's something that our consulting group really wants to has looked into. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's worth exploring.
Yeah.
Barney, anything?
No.
I think we can wrap.
Okay.
Take a deep breath, guys. You did it.
You're about to see 4 judges wrap.
Can I say that we tried everything we knew to throw you guys? We failed. I want to come work for you.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
And our hourly rate is very
Yeah, so I think, first off, you guys paced well. Maybe a little odd breath or hiccup here or there, but in general, you had a nice flow. You've obviously researched, practiced this, did pretty well. As my colleague said, yeah, we started throwing stuff at you, and you had the answers in your data, and you could have packaged those answers maybe a little better, like a cost and risk opportunity exchange between, as you were trying to tell us, oh wait, this is a huge, on various levels, problem. Sure, you can get solar, but that's the elephant in the room, right? It kind of showed just the basic trades between those, but no, I think you guys in general handled yourselves really well. I love the fact that you put out good statements at the start of a couple of sections of your presentation. So we knew, okay, it's not just here's the issue, here's where we'd like to take you, and now we'll show you the story. And so it helps us focus between what we agree with and what we don't agree with.
Yeah.
And then lastly, my uncle owns facilities with hundreds upon thousands of chickens.
Wow.
And I wasn't going to say anything during your whole thing,
Oh, no.
but I completely understand a lot of elements of this situation.
I love the presentation. You guys knew all of your information. I really enjoyed diving in. From a business perspective, I wanted to see or understand the risk involved and more I understand the ethical part of why we want to do this for future generations. But again, we're here to maximize shareholder wealth, right? And so understanding that upfront investment and where we wanted to go and seeing the return would have played much better in terms of seeing projections over, say, 30 years of where margins could go, making that implementation would have popped. I really love your play on words. I'm gonna tell my 10-year-old daughter when I get home, there's power in poop,
Yes.
and
she'll really like that. That's all I have.
Yeah, one other quick, the only thing I found really wrong, that's not a chicken you had in your logos. That was like a little bird or something. Over on the thing. Get a chicken. No, it was, again, just really well done, folks.
Well done.
Good job.
Yeah.
Let me just talk about something that, you guys focused a lot on Walmart. And what I found was I began to wonder what percent of Tyson's sales are from Walmart.
17.3.
Yeah, so it's 17.3.
So, what, I mean, but
Yeah, like right here.
That's annual.
what is the, I guess, I wanted to kind of put that in some order of magnitude. Like, who's the largest, what's the largest component? That would have been helpful, okay? The other thing that I wondered about was the fertilizer produced, you know? You did have numbers for what that would produce, right? And was all the energy gonna be used by, let's go back to those numbers. Yeah,
These ones?
are those Tyson specific?
So these are Tyson Foods and their subsidiaries.
Okay, here was the last thing I had. When you talked about the fact that a lot of the chickens come from small farms, I was curious about how many, what percent of the chickens come from small farms, and the problem that you have with trying to regulate those guys, if you're gonna talk about them in conjunction with reducing pollution. Do you have a feel for what percent comes from small farms?
So I looked really deeply into that, and I couldn't find anything other than that they had 6,000 contracted farmers. And the farms really ranged from medium-sized farms to very small farms, and so they didn't have any information on that that they could find, unfortunately.
That makes the whole thing a lot more difficult, because let's say 50% of their chickens come from the small farms.
Right.
Now you got a real problem.
Yeah,
trying to
exactly.
figure out. Okay. But you guys done good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, that's why they're staying with small farms, is it helps
That's
spread it through
right. That's right.
regulations
I also
and
like,
avoids.
I like the eggs
Oh,
and the drumsticks.
It'll be a lot of fun with
Good
it,
job.
yeah. All right, thank you so much.
Good job.